Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass's Allure of the Pour. I am your host, Lori Budd, and I am a UC Davis graduate and a Psalms Day certified and WSET Level 2 certified. And I am very excited today because I have Delia from Viader Vineyards on the Howell Mountain. And I have so many questions and so much to ask her, but I'm going to let her do a little brief hello before we get into everything. So hi, Delia.
Hi, Lori. Thank you for having me. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
ahead of Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving early to you also. So before we actually get into the wine, the first thing I have to talk about, you have a PhD in philosophy. So, what led you down that path? And as you were obtaining, or I don't know what the correct word is, because obtaining, I guess, researching your PhD, what was your thought process of what you were going to do with a PhD in philosophy?
Well, initially it was a requirement. My father was a diplomat, and I was thinking of following his footsteps, and it was required for the university that I was going to attend for diplomatic studies to have a PhD or a JD equivalent. So in the end, I fell in love with philosophy, actually. My concentration or major, as you call it, is logic and pure mathematics. So that's how it translates to it. It has nothing to do with wine, but there is a lot about it that works with critical thinking, application of critical thinking and application of logical business outcomes. So well, it is a long way.
Well, my undergrad was marine biology, so there's paths.
But at least it has something.
Yeah, there's paths down the road that you take, and those forks. And I've always believed, and I guess this is a philosophical approach, I've always believed that you have to just go the path that is, you feel you need to go, and it will eventually lead you to where you should end up. So, it may not be the direct path, but you had the path that led you to your passion.
Never direct, yeah.
Right.
Totally.
So you, I've heard multiple times that you are called the wine mother, and that you're the mother of vines, the mother of wines, and the mother of a winemaker. I have to tell you, when I read that the first time, I got a huge smile on my face. I was like, I absolutely love that. But so, can you share a little bit about your origin story? So, we can figure out mother of the winemaker. we go there. But how did you become a mother of vines and a mother of wine?
Well, because really, to put a vineyard, I felt that I was really raising the vines just like I raised my children. I didn't want to call myself a vintner or a vineyardist or anything. I'm really the vine mother, or the mother of the vines, because I'm raising them to excellence. And with the wine, it's the same thing. I think there is a lot that we do that is kind of that nurturing side of the mostly women, that in elevating, in raising a wine. And I think you raise it in the vineyard, and I think you don't mess it up in the cellar. It was just a great pride for myself to have one of my sons to decide that this was actually worth pursuing. So that's why I ended up being the mother of the vines, the mother of the wine, and the mother of the winemaker, because one of my sons is the winemaker.
And
so
now, did
it's
it's absolutely a reason to be proud. Did he always want to? So, like, I know that a lot of families that are in the wine industry, the children grow up and they're like, no, I'm not going to be in the industry, and then they were like, no, I do want to be in the industry. Did Alan do that, or was he a wine? He was focused for the go-go.
No, he did not focus on the wine. He's an outdoors guy. He loves the vineyard. He always enjoyed that. And I kind of slowly had to, coach him into getting in the winemaking, which is, to me, a natural approach. But he studied viticulture. Chemistry is not my thing. I really don't like that. And I said, well, there are many ways to get to winemaking, and he basically grew up with it just by coming behind me every single time that we were in the cellar since he was 5 or 6 years old. So it wasn't a surprise for him to end up in the winemaking, but he really, really focused on the vineyard side, on the viticulture side. And that's what he really loves to do. And then in 2006, when he graduated, actually, he went to UC Davis also. So we kind of worked the path into the winemaking, because it's really a kind of a logical continuation. You really make the wine in the vineyard, and then
Absolutely.
You just nurture it in the cellar.
Yes, if you want to make good wine,
I'm very proud.
Yes, if you want to make good wine, you cannot ignore the vineyard, because we all know that saying, right? You can't make beep wine, or you can't make great wine out of beep vines, but you can make beep wine out of great vines. So you have to pay attention to, the vineyard itself really is where, as cliche as it is where the wine is made. As a winemaker, all you can do if you have good fruit is mess it up. And we got to make sure you can't do that.
And I usually explain it to my customers or my visitors that we all start with grapes, but we've been doing this for 36 years, and it would be the same as you go to a restaurant and you go to the French Laundry and you ask for chicken, or you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken and you ask for chicken. They both started with chicken, but it does taste different. So it makes a difference, the expertise and the years that you've been doing this, and a superior vineyard. We have a superior vineyard location, and we really take great care of our chicken or raw material of our grapes. And so, yes, our wines show that. So it's a little bit of nature and nurture together.
Yep, it's that mothering again. There you go. Absolutely.
Yes.
So let's talk about how Viader started. So in 1986, you just purchased land on Howell Mountain and planted 30 acres. So one, how do you just come across 30 acres on Howell Mountain?
Well, it's almost 100 acres, and I didn't come across. It was initially was offered to my father, and it was offered as a residence location because of the view. And I was the one that came with the idea that perhaps it would be really appropriate, because I had friends that were in the wine business very close by that were really, I thought it was a fascinating thing. I didn't know anything about wine making, but I knew about good wines. And I proposed to my father that we could put a vineyard. And he goes, after all the money I poured into your education, all you want to become is a farmer? Because to him, it really was not appropriate continuation for his only daughter. He didn't think it was professional enough. And I said, I can make it, Dad. I can make a business. I can really create a living, and it will be ideal. You know, I was a single mom. I still are a single mom, and had all my kids with me. And to me, it was the perfect location, just to have them with me in the vineyard, in the cellar. They were always with me. That's why it wasn't a surprise that one of them at least had an interest in wine. But my dad says, okay, show me the business plans. Show me how you're going to do it. How long am I going to be on the note, you know, when I'm coming off the note? So I think that was really critical in making sure that I had something thought out and a plan to follow. And I asked for, you know, the time to production, and I asked the time after production. So I asked him for like a 10-year note. And I actually came through to a T and paid back and with interest. And he still didn't think that it was good enough, that I could have done so much better. With my mom, it was different, because every time if I came in the cover of a magazine, then I would send it to my mom, and my mom would say, oh, look, this is my daughter in the cover of the Wine Spectator. For my dad, if anybody would ask him, what is it that your daughter is doing? It would, oh, she's a farmer. So it wasn't really enough for him as a profession to be a winemaker. But I said, the kids are happy. They're growing close to nature. I'm with them 24/7. So this is an ideal place for a child to grow. So I thought, never look back. And everybody came out all right.
And now, when in '86, when this happened, how many wineries were already situated on Howell Mountain at that point?
There were not. I mean, of course, Randy Dunn was there, but not that many. And my neighbor Burgess, but there were not that many. I remember being accepted to the Napa Valley Vintners Association, and I was number 44. Now it's 550 members. So it's been a while, and it's been a certain growth. And Howell Mountain Howell Mountain wines were known before. They always, of all the appellations, it is the most distinctive, regardless of stylistic differences in the winemaking, because Howell Mountain fruit has that black cassis that is very easily to discern, even if you are a winemaker with a completely opposite style to somebody else. You can tell it's Howell Mountain fruit.
Right.
So it's luck of the draw, because I had an idea of what I wanted to make. I just didn't know how to do it. And that's
again
how really it all started.
things fall where they may, and you have to be able to see them and take advantage of them. So you said it's actually 100 acres. And so I had the numbers. Did you plant 30 acres? Is that
right? That's all we developed because it's up and down, and it's very steep. And that was another first because I wanted to go with the sun, and everybody was going this way, and I wanted to go this way, and everybody thought I was crazy. But many times people thought, or they said, no, it's impossible. And to me, it's kind of a trigger word. You tell me it's impossible, and I just have to say, watch me.
Yeah.
Do the impossible.
We can do 5 impossible things every morning, right?
Yes.
And how did you decide what you wanted to plant on those 30 acres?
Well, because I was coming from abroad, I call all of my friends in wine or viticulture. So I brought a consultant from New Zealand that was an expert in organic hillside development, and then I called my friends in Bordeaux. That it is funny, at that time Michel Rolland wasn't Michel Rolland. He was just a friend. And he had a lab in Bordeaux, and he had Chateau Bonpasseur, but he was not the Allure winemaker, the flying winemaker as he became later, which is kind of funny because 25 years later I asked him to kind of consult with my son as I'm transitioning from my winemaking to his winemaking style. And I said, I don't want him to copy me, and I don't want him, I want him to fly on his own, but I want to make sure that he has the perfect experienced consultant that will give him the perspective to make a wine of the world. It is not just a Howell Mountain wine, it's not a Napa Valley wine. It is a wine that can be seen at the same level of the best wines of the world. I wanted to keep that kind of global perspective, and for that, Michel Rolland was perfect. We had a joke, because we're friends. I said, if we get any accolades, I'm very proud of my son. If something goes wrong, you're fired. It's your fault.
That's awesome.
So it just worked out, and it's also serendipity because Danny Schuster, which is the consultant in hillside viticulture, I found him 20 years later in Italy consulting for the vineyard next door to mine. I had a vineyard in Tuscany for about 8 years, and I just found him in a little restaurant, a local restaurant, in a tiny place in Italy, and it's like, what are you doing here? And it's kind of serendipity all around. Very interesting world, the big family of wine.
Yes, it absolutely is. So now you had started to mention, Howell Mountain is very distinct, and it, it was like it's like the first sub-appellation of Napa Valley. So in order to be a sub-appellation, there needs to be something very distinct and different. So let's go a little bit further into what that distinction is. You talked about that the flavor, but what about the soil? And that's really a distinctive feature of Howell Mountain also.
It is a distinctive feature because we maybe have about 8 inches of topsoil. There is no soil. There is just rock. And then below that, more rock. And below that, more rock. Rock, 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 rock. We don't have We have perhaps a little bit of sandy loam. That's about as much as what we can call soil in existence. Our entire winery is built underground. So when we were building the cellar, so to speak, we were seeing in many areas the same thing that we were seeing in some areas of the vineyard, that we needed to use dynamite. And at that time we could use dynamite because it's just sheer rock. And it's a very hard rock. The term is rhyolite, which is almost as hard as the granite. And there wasn't any hydraulic hammer that could crack it. So dynamite was needed in many parts. And while we were excavating, we could also see in the parts that we were closing in, about 35 feet down, the dangling roots of the vines. So it's
wow.
You can see them growing out of the rock. It's that intense of a stress for the vine. It's very, very rocky, volcanic rock. So I think that gives a certain element to the vine, that the vine translates into this characteristic, nice, elegant acidity, and which is kind of the delivery of a very subtle tannin profile that really fills your mouth without poking. It's round because it really feels round in your palate. There are no poking elements that bite. So that is very characteristic of our wines, and in particularly of Howell Mountain wines that are done in this fashion. So I think I started the emphasis on Cabernet Franc because I found that Cabernet Franc in this soil does so well, and it really gives a lot of floral elements that make it so much supple, so much subtle in the palate that you really want to have a second sip and perhaps another
third.
sip, perhaps, like you were saying, it has to be inviting, because wine, it's really about pleasure and about enjoyment. Shouldn't be something intellectual, and shouldn't be something that you have to like. No, it just comes in waves and seduces you in a way.
Absolutely. And so, do you? When I think Howell Mountain, I also think fog, and first of all, I think it must be pretty cool to be above the fog and
yes.
see, and you're like in clouds almost when because it feels and it looks like you're floating in cotton candy sometimes. Visually, it's like you're above because it's sunny here, and if you go down to St. Helena, it is not. It's cloudy. So where is St. Helena?
It's very interesting. I took several pictures, and it looks like you're floating on cotton candy. Sometimes the fog can be that dense, and it gives us a little bit of a respite if we've had a season that with a lot of heat spikes. The fog kind of slows down because it dissipates as we get closer to the noon hours, and then it continues in the afternoon. And we have such a rocky soil that we planted the vines closer to the rock, so they're not as tall. And the canopy protects the vine. They're perfectly aligned with east-west orientation. And we have a east-facing or west-facing hillside. So by putting the vines in that direction, at the noon hours, which are the hottest hours, the canopy, it's really above the bunch of grapes, and it keeps them cool and it keeps them protected. So we don't have what they call a morning side or an afternoon side that can get a little bit overcooked, but also we're closer to the ground. So after the sun sets, the volcanic rock releases all that trapped heat. So we get, even after sunset, an extra hour or two of maturation that continues throughout the season, and that really gets us ahead of the rest of Howell Mountain because of the exposure and because of the angle of exposure and because it's closer to the rock. It's something that has been proven very beneficial because we always are done harvesting before any conception of rain coming in and ruining the harvest. So it's very important for us.
And that direction also, if you're in that east-west situation and at noon where typically the sun is at its brightest, if it's right above it, you're protecting your fruit. And if you're doing Cab and Cab Franc, you don't want that overly pyrazine, and those you're protecting yourself from that pyrazine production also.
Yes, you won't find anything kind of greenish or non totally mature, ripe fruit.
Okay.
So
and
that's
it's got to also that fog also. Even though you're saying you're harvesting before everybody else, it's got to help that intensity, allowing that fruit to truly ripen, not just sugar, but everything, because the fog is protecting it.
It slows down a little bit because we have the heaviest fog in the middle of summer. So around August, right before harvest, you really need to slow it down, and it helps us get our at least 180 days to full maturity. But yet, it's rare the years in which we harvest late, which is for us in October. We usually harvest very early in September, which used to be kind of a problem because in Italy I would harvest at the same time.
Oh, tough to be a little tough to be in both places.
It was interesting because I was harvesting the whole month basically of September with a plane ride and 9 hours difference. So I don't know how I did it. I was chronically sleep deprived for a whole month, but it was fun.
So down in the valley, they're starting? I'm assuming that their bud break, the flowering, all of that is actually earlier than you, is it?
Yes, it's not so much the bud break or the flowering. It's towards the end of the season is when we start kind of slowing down. It depends on the variety, but Cabernet Franc comes first always, and then Cabernet, and then Malbec, and then last Petit Verdot. But we also have an interesting Syrah, which is the kind of secret ingredient in the black label.
Well, I think that that's a beautiful introduction to bring a glass up and let's talk. So what we are drinking today is your black label, right? The Viader, and it is 56% Cabernet Sauvignon, 23% Syrah, 12% Malbec, and 9% of my beloved and favorite Cabernet Franc. So tell us about, and I'm sorry, it is 2017.
So it's the current release, and it is absolutely beautiful. I mean,
it is beautiful.
You tasted it. It is very savory. It's very, the acidity just hits it right, where it really.
I actually, when you bring it up to your nose, I would think it's more Syrah than 23%. I think it's the Syrah plays a nice little balance, or like peeking over the fence or something.
But it's not overly bacony, and it's not overly Syrah-y, I would say. If you didn't know it's there, you would just, it's a hint.
Right. Just peeking over the fence to let you know it's there.
It's there, but the funny thing, my son came out with this blend, and he uses the Malbec, actually, which is from an Argentine clone. He uses it 12% and sometimes 7% and sometimes it's a really small percent. He calls it the pinch of salt that makes everything taste better. And actually, it's very unusual, but it keeps it all together. Malbec kind of holds it together.
Blankets everything, brings it together.
It. Because the Cabernet is a mountain Cabernet, and it could be much more intense if you didn't have the other elements. But if you put it all together with the right acidity, it just smooths everything and makes it very, very savory, a very interesting wine.
And the other thing that I think, and you had kind of brought it up a little bit, even though it's a cab, right? It's got this beautiful body, but the tannin, and I think, I mean, I'm going to say it's the blend that's bringing it all together and working it. The tannins are just silky enough that they grip your tongue in such a beautiful way that then the mid palate comes in, and then the back palate. If you actually sit and think, which honestly it's tough to do because it's so good, you just really want another sip. But if you actually sit down to analyze the palate of it, there's so many layers to this, and
that's the whole idea.
Right. Each time you sip it, you get a little bit different. It's like watching your favorite old movie, and every time you watch it, you're like, oh, I missed that last time, or oh, I missed that,
Yes, it is exactly the intention, because it has, on your second or third or fourth sip, you may find some almost Indian spices there. I mean, it's so interesting that it doesn't all come at once. It comes in layers, and that's the beauty of it, because it doesn't overwhelm your palate, and it doesn't grip. It just gently, it's like a background. Yeah, it's just like the background music that makes the whole dinner or meal or whatever, it makes you more relaxed. It makes you more at ease. This wine is beautiful in that sense that it's so elegant, and it has the appropriate density to intrigue but not overwhelm, and then you want to keep exploring.
It really is beautiful. There's chocolate in there. There's it's funny because on the nose, I would say it's milk chocolate kind of on the nose, but then when you taste it, it's more
dark
of a,
chocolate.
Yeah.
It's
so
almost like a dark chocolate.
You're getting, at least I'm getting the best of both worlds. Like, I'm getting the milk chocolate on the nose, but then once it's on your palate, and it lingers there. That it's that dark chocolate, all of that dark fruit. It is incredible, and there's so many layers to it. And I think the Syrah and that Malbec really pull it in, and it's a beautiful blend. So is your black label always since Alan's been doing that same blend, like you said, different percentages, but is it
different
always,
percentages?
But
yeah, and it actually came out. He's the one that came out with it, because we came to this understanding. First generation winemaker, second generation winemaker. Do we agree 100% all the time? No, we don't. He has his style and I have my style. So we said, okay, Viader is going to be true to its style, which is more of a classic Bordeaux blend. And Viader will always be Cabernet Franc. But this is his interpretation of the best of the vineyard can produce under his idea. This is his baby. He created this blend. And he decided to go non-traditional Bordeaux because he wanted Cabernet and Syrah. But then he wanted Malbec in it. And then it was, okay, and I need to add a little bit of this or that. He perfects it to his style. And if you were to have Viader and Viader Black Label together, you will see they're completely different personalities. They're very, very easy to discern when you have them side to side. One is the wine that it will really improve with decades, and will always be pleasant, but it's more of a classic wine. And then you have Viader Black Label, which is purely hedonistic because it's just for pure pleasure. It's just to enjoy, and it has a little bit higher acidity and a little bit, it just kind of hits you in the right spot, so to speak. And it was all his idea, and we call it black simply because the color, because of the Syrah, is so dark. It's so inky black. But
and how long has the Black Label been? What was the first production year, or I'm sorry, vintage year of the Black
2008.
Label?
2008.
So 2 years after he started winemaking, he was like...
Right. It was like, we will keep the style of Viader always the same, but you can go and spread your wings with a different blend of your choice, and this is your interpretation of the state. And that's how we keep our differences, and he's also allowed to present his own expression, his own artistic expression, which is important. It's not easy
Absolutely.
To work families. I don't want to impose anything, and I do like Delia, that he can go and have something. He always battles me about this because he said, "Mom, I make all the wines and I'm proud of all the wines that I make." And I said, "Yes, but this is your baby. This is important. This is." It's like, well, I don't pay attention more to that one than the other one. And it's like, but this is your creation. This is how you express your interpretation of the state. So that's how we keep it. Each one can have its say, and it is interesting at the same time.
So there's, on the tech sheet, it says there's 425 cases of the black label produced. How many cases is your production total?
The total production is 2,500 of all the 4 wines that we make, but it really depends on the vintage. 2017 we were a little bit more selective than usual. And usually we would do around 750 cases. We couldn't. So it's only 425, but it's usually it's about 750 cases. It's not a huge production. We're really very, very small.
So I want to get into climate change a little and how horrible it's been, and especially on the Howell Mountain. But before I get that, because I started going down the climate change rabbit hole, and I read that you actually had a vintage, your 2003 vintage was destroyed by an
went up in smoke. Yeah. Yes.
I was like, oh my God.
Fire followed me.
What? Just briefly, why would somebody decide? I mean, I don't understand arson at all, but why your wine? What?
Well, it wasn't only my wine. It was 70 wineries. It was a wine that I had stored temporarily at Mare Island. This is October of 2005. Actually, October 12, 2005. I will never forget that. And the arsonist, it's Mark Anderson, and he's still in jail. And he will continue. Because for several reasons he decided he was double selling things and trying to make it disappear. He thought that by torching the entire warehouse, nothing would come up to light. And in that, there were 70 wineries affected that had their wine stored in Mare Island. So mine happened to be the 2003 vintage, of which we lost 95%. We only kept the big bottles here at the winery because those are hand labeled, and that's all the wine I had in 2003. So it was horrible because it was a day that I will not forget. And
that's insane.
Then going back the rabbit hole, the rabbit hole of climate change is something that we've always been aware. We're farmers. We see the climate getting more extreme, and we're looking and we're experimenting with different varieties. Therefore, the Malbec. Actually, we found that this clone of Malbec does very well in the mountain and does take heat. Cabernet Franc also takes heat very well. Syrah takes heat very well. We have clones of Syrah that are very similar to the Côte Rôtie, which is very hot and rocky. So we're experimenting with different varietals. We're going to experiment next year with different plantings for about a few years, about a decade. We experiment in buying Tempranillo. So we work with Tempranillo, which is also a grape that is highly adapted to the Rioja and the Priorat area, which is very rocky and can be very hot. So we're trying to see how the varieties adapt to our situation and how they adapt to climate change and what would happen if we get a little bit hotter. And we're looking at Touriga Nacional, Portuguese grapes that could perhaps adapt again to climate change. We're trying to see what will be a better suit in terms of grape variety that will produce something of quality, but that will take on the climate change. You know, we're farmers, we see it, but we also have a long-term view. This is not happening tomorrow. We have to plan for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ahead. To that effect, you know, just like I had my son following me, my grandchildren love to follow in the cellar and take grape samples, particularly closest to harvest, because the grapes are very, very sweet. So we try to kind of not coach them, but educate them into something that is in sync with nature and in sync with the environment and in sync with the cycles of nature, and something that you prepare and try to put forward your best foot forward. Not only taking care of the environment, but looking ahead. What can we do to have a better harvest, to have a better quality of product? So changing varietal grapes could be a form, and then a few things that we are practicing or researching in the cellar in terms of treatment, how gentle the fermentation, how slow the fermentation, how high temperature or low temperature, in longer maceration or less maceration. We're trying to see what the variables are to try to keep everything gentle and smooth and elegant, even if something we cannot control at all, like the weather, keeps changing. So the things that we can control is what we're trying to see the variables and play with the variables, so we can always deliver something that is up to par.
And so we can't talk about anything in 2020 without COVID and the fires. So, I mean, COVID is its own, entity and has destroyed so many different things, but you also had a direct thing with the fires. So
yes, and unfortunately, the vineyard took the biggest hit. So there will be a lot of vineyard that will have to be pulled out and replanted, and that's very sad to see. But it saved. All of the structures are standing because of many features that we have at the estate that were fire preventative. And if you see everything around us, everybody around us burnt to the ground. We are the only ones standing. So that tells you something. So having fire breaks, in keeping the undergrowth clean, and having areas with decomposed granite, which is basically sand, around the properties where a fire has to stop because there's nothing to burn. Having all the structures be glass, metal, or rock covered is also important. And with a slate roof is very important, because during the fire, which we had coming from every direction, it's the embers that fly around that continue the fire. And in this instance, the fire came to my front door, which happens to be clad in solid copper, and that's why it didn't catch fire. But the glass, the outside part of the glass, cracked.
Oh.
We have double E windows, and the outside of the glass cracked. That's how close it came.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And now, do you live at, is your
Yes,
home also at the winery? Everything?
Yes.
Because you have 100 acres.
Yes. So all the buildings are contiguous. But it was very, very close.
Wow. And
but it's still standing.
Yeah. I mean, not like just out of pure, I guess it's kind of somewhat morbid curiosity or whatever. But what goes through your mind when, I mean, you have had these fires in the past, and now this fire comes again, and are you getting a knock on the door and you're like, oh my God, I've got to go through this again, and you're just running out? What's going through your mind as you see this fire approaching your home, your business, your family?
Well, there's always a lesson to be learned and shared, because whatever worked, whatever kept my house standing, should be shared, and perhaps it will prevent other homes from being burned. And that's what I've been sharing with everyone that wanted to see it on site, from the supervisors, Napa County supervisors, to CAL FIRE, and a number of authorities, just to see what needs to happen and needs to change. Not to create a nightmare for the people that are going to build, but you need to build with a certain idea of it is going to happen, and you need to be prepared. And it's better to have the umbrella before the rain happens than get caught in the rain without it. That's always been my idea. So I loved my manzanita forest and my beautiful hillside vegetation, but I kept it very clean and very separated. And it is a pity that most of my manzanitas burned, but it would have been a lot worse if we didn't have it as clean and preserved as it was. As a matter of fact, the firefighters took this as their command post, because if they lost this, they would have lost the whole city of Angwin, which is above us. And, they kept the fire, tried to keep it at the canyon, and they did a fantastic job at preserving as much as they could. And we have very close for comfort pictures of the airplane dropping that pink retardant thing. So we have a lot of pink vineyard right now, right on our vineyard. So it's just too close for comfort. But we're still here. So there's something that can be done. It's not all defeat and terrible. You can take your lesson and move on and apply it.
Right. You got to learn from history or doomed to repeat. Yep.
Yes, unfortunately, but
yes.
some people like me have good memory, so I try to remember the lessons. So,
and what about your actual 2020 harvest?
It's going to be pretty small. Yeah, it's going to be pretty small because again, we're focusing on research, of which there isn't that much. But we have a unique situation in which, yes, we had picked and harvested before the fire, and because for us, the fire happened in 9/27, the glass fire, and we had already picked. We were done by September 21st. So everything was tucked in the caves underground, of which we have a air circulation system that we usually open at night to get some fresh air, but we closed during the day, and we kept it closed throughout the fire. So humidity goes up, but there is no smoke coming in. That was the important thing, or barely any smoke coming in. So still, we're going to be ultra selective and designate research lots that we want to experiment what happens at different levels of what some people call smoke taint. And it depends at what time it happened. It's like things that happen to a pregnant woman in the last month. You know, it's like the baby's already protected, so it's much less than if it were to happen during the growing season or during a different vegetative cycle, developmental
right.
cycle on the vine. By the time it happened, our babies were already underground and sealed, basically. So we're hopeful that we will save a very selective amount and come out with some 2020, just to show you, because the whole point is to show you the vintage in the bottle and to show you the beauty of that vintage and to tell the story of that vintage. This is the sun and the rain and also a little bit of the fire that happened during that vintage. Just a little bit of fire. It happened. It's part of the narrative that you encapsulate all the challenges that we had during that season. But you know, talking about that, this is 2017. You know, and it was also a year of fires.
And it's beautiful.
Not that close, and
but
you can see that there's been a story of that season, and this is what we can tell in the glass.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing your story and for sharing this lovely bottle with me. It is a beautiful wine, and can you tell people how can they find Viader? Where do they go? What do they do? How do they support you?
The best way is to visit us at our website, which is Viader.com. It's Viader, Viader.com. And that's where you can set up an appointment to come and visit. That's where you can see what we offer. If you can't come and see us, and where you probably will find the podcast in the press. It's where you get to know us a little bit more.
And they can purchase there, and you are still doing tastings,
yes,
correct, by appointment? And
we're doing tastings by appointment, and my son is an expert in Zoom tastings. By now we adapt.
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to share, I don't know if you are aware, but I am the founder of Cab Franc Day, which is December 4th. So Cab Franc Day is coming up. Yes. So please go out to social media and share your love of Cab Franc on social media on December 4th, so Friday, next Friday. And
awesome.
I'm going to add you to the distribution list for next year for Cab Franc Day promotion.
Please.
But Cab Franc is very near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love it. That's what we focus on is single varietal Cab Franc. So it's all about.
We have that under the Dare, our second label. We dare to do things that other people were not doing it, because 35 years ago when I was blending 40% of Cabernet Franc with my Viader, people were like, "Why are you diluting your beautiful Cabernet?" And I said, "I'm not diluting. I'm adding complexity and elegance." And it's funny how in one generation everything changed, and all of a sudden, they call me the Cheval Blanc of Howell Mountain. It's like, I wish I had that. But we have a Dare 100% Cabernet Franc.
Oh my gosh! Well, I'm going to have to get my hands on that, and I want to see it all over social media on December 4th, because I am on a one-person mission. Which it started as a one-person mission, but it's internationally recognized. I mean, it's celebrated. We went to Villeneuve to talk to them about it, and it's all more than a blending grape. That's Cab Franc Day.
Absolutely.
More than a blending grape. So I would like to raise a glass virtually with you to hopefully one day see you in person and physically clink glasses.
Yes.
But thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing. And I am very sad for all of anybody who was affected by the fires, but I'm glad to hear that you guys are still up and going and fighting strong and learning how to live a proper life in an environment that may not be so friendly at all times.
Right. I mean, it is part of being the best steward of the land is to preserve it. And you need to protect it. In order to preserve it. You need to do the right things. So, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And as this will not be out in time, but happy Thanksgiving tomorrow. Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.